Okay, so we're going to continue on talking about our slope and y-intercept with tables, graphs, and equations this time. So the only new thing we kind of covered today was looking at the slope equation, which looks like y equals mx plus b, and the m, or the number that's right next to the x, is our slope. And the b, that is added or subtracted or something extra out there to the side, is our y-intercept. And that's even y-intercept. Even if that's a 0, which you will see that looks terrible. But that's what that's going to stand for. That extra thing added or subtracted is our y-intercept. Okay, so the first page is just looking at the tables though. And so for this part, remember, to find our slope, we have to use the slope formula, which is y2 minus y1, hold on a second, y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. And it doesn't matter which 2 points you pick, but just probably, if you can, pick positive numbers, because it works out a little bit easier and you don't have to deal with negatives. And however you want to label them, just remember it's always x and y. X and y. And so the first group, the first point was 3 and 18, so I'm just going to label those my 1s, since those were the first ones I had. And then plug in those numbers into your formula. So y2 was 42 minus y1, which was 18, on top of x2, which was 7, minus x1, which was 3. So I'm literally just typing it into the formula. That's all I'm doing. The hardest part is labeling it. 42 minus 18 gives me 24. And then 7 minus 3 gives me 4. And then I'm going to divide that. So 24 divided by 4 is 6. So that's my slope. And now to get the y-intercept, so this is the weird part about tables. I'm looking for x to be 0 to be able to find my y-intercept, and I don't see that on my table. So I'm going to come off to the side a little bit, and I'm going to start with 3. You can also start with -1, but I feel like more often you're going to be working up instead of down on a table, so that's what I'm going to recreate. So I've got my x and my y. 3 and 18 are on the table they gave me, and now on the x, I need to work my way back to 0. Okay, 0 is where I'm going to find my y-intercept. So that means I have to work backwards on the y value also. But on the y value, I'm going to be using the slope to go backwards. So I'm going to be subtracting 6 3 different times to make my way back to 0. So the first time, 18 minus 6 is 12. Then again, 12 minus 6 is 6. And then 6 minus 6 is 0. So that means my y-intercept is 0. So I'm going to write that over here. My y is 0. Same thing on this next table. You got to label it x and y, x and y. So then the first one I wrote down, I'm going to put the 1 next to it, and then the bottom one can be my 2's. And I would write the formula down every single time until you feel really comfortable doing it. So then you can plug in your numbers from there. So 40.5 minus 22.5 over 9 minus 4. So 40.5 minus 22.5 is 18. And then 9 minus 4 is 5. So when I divide that, 18 divided by 5 is 3.6. So that's my slope, and my y-intercept is already here. It's the y value that's across from 0 on the x. Same thing with number 3. I'm going to use the lowest 2, and I'm going to write down my formula, y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1 And then I'm going to label these. I've got X and Y, X and Y. These can be my 1s, and these can be my 2s. So we're going to plug all that in. 42 minus 14 over 12 minus 4. So 42 minus 14 is 28. 12 minus 4 is 8. 28 divided by 8 is 3.5. So there's our slope. And now we're going to have to work backwards. So I'm going to recreate the table. And I've got 4 and 14. And on my x value, I have to work all the way back to 0. That's where I'm trying to get. And to do that on the y side, remember, I've got to take my slope away from it each time. So I'm going to subtract 3.5 until I get back to 0. So when I subtract 3.5 the first time, I get 10.5. Okay, so that matches up with 3, and I'm going to do it again. So minus 10.5. Okay, so then 10.5 minus 3.5 again gives me 7. So then 7 minus 3.5 is going to be 3.5. And then one more time to get back to 0, to be matched up with 0. Minus 3.5 is going to be 0. So my y is 0. Same thing on number 4, find your slope, and then on this one you only have to go back one place to get to 0. So whenever you find your slope, say you use these 4 to use your slope formula and get your slope, you're just going to have to subtract one time from that 55. Number 5, same thing, use whichever numbers you want, write down your formula, and your y-intercept is already on the table. And yes, there's a lot of repeats on that y-intercept, but it's okay, it's not wrong. Okay, so then now we're just identifying the slope and the y-intercept for each equation. You're not actually solving anything, there's nothing extra you have to do. We're just identifying it. So remember I said with the slope equation, it looks like y equals mx plus b, where m is your slope and b, including the sign in front, is your y-intercept. Okay, so that's all you're doing on this one. If we look at number 6, this number that's next to my x is my slope, and I'm going to turn that into a decimal by dividing it. So 9 divided by 5, so I'm going to write s is 1.8. And the y-intercept is 8, but you have to include the sign that comes right before it. So it's negative 8. Same thing on this one. My slope is right here, but I need to turn that into a decimal. So my slope, 0.6, we'll say 6.7 or 6.6. My y-intercept is the positive 3. And same thing on number 8. Here's my number next to the x. That's the slope. It's positive. And then this number that's extra with the sign in front is my y. Okay, so try the rest of those on your own. On these with the graphs, these have been messing people up today. You have to make good points or try to see those good points. So to get your slope, I mean. And I like to use the y-intercept just because you have to identify it anyway, so you might as well make it a point. So my y-intercept is 2, so I can go ahead and write that down. And the point for that, since it doesn't go anywhere on the x value, it only goes up on the 2, you would write that as 0, 2. And that's your x and your y. One of your x and your y's. Another one, it's so hard to see, but I think right there, I think at 4, 4 is another point, because we go over to 4 and then you go up 4, and then we would label that also x, y. It doesn't matter which one you pick. Maybe this is the 1s and this is the 2s, either way. And then use your slope formula again, the same thing. number 12, it goes through the center, so that already tells you that your y is 0 because it goes through the middle. Okay, so then to find 2 more points, you have to look in those crosshairs. There's a point here, so that is 2, 4, 2 comma 4, and another point could be at, I mean, you can use your y-intercept, which would be 0, 0, or you can also use 1 and 2. And then use your slope formula, y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1, and label. So remember, it's always x and y, and the first one you write down can be your 1s, and the second can be the 2s. Plug it in. y2 minus y1, x2 minus x1. And this one, 2 minus 4 is negative 2, and 1 minus 2 is negative 1. So then if you divide that, negative 2 divided by negative 1 is a positive 2. So there's your slope, and there's your y. On number 13, a lot of people have tried to put the wrong thing as the y-intercept. Not real sure why, but that should be your y-intercept. And you can also use this point, and I think that's a point. So negative 2, 1, so we'll just label it x1, y1, and then negative 3, positive 3. So x2, y2, and use your slope formula. On this one, it's already given you the 2 points, so label them however you want. Say you want this to be x1, y1, x2, y2, that totally works. Your y-intercept is right here, so it's between the 1 and the 2, so that y would be negative 1.5, which seems kind of weird. And on this one, you've got your y-intercept, which you could use if you wanted to as a point, 0, 3. And you can even use this one here, which was 4 and 1. Label those, use your formula. And the true or false M stands for the y-intercept. Go back on this video and double check that if you need to. In a table, the y-intercept is always where the x is 1. You can go back on that and check and see if that's true or false. And B stands for the y-intercept, true or false.